Tell me about yourself is the most common interview question. Yet still, if you're 5 days or less before your job interview, you should avoid spending one full day preparing your introductory statement. Similarly, if you choose to prepare a story bank for your upcoming job interview, I recommend that you prioritize preparing your stories and only prepare your introductory statement last. Okay, so this would be a prioritization technique. The second topic I'd like to talk about here would be with respect to rambling. Why do candidates ramble when introducing themselves in job interviews? The most common scenario is because they would recite their CV as their introductory statement. You could even recite it in chronological order. You could even recite it with some details that maybe you added that are not in your CV, but talking too much about yourself, so to speak, without making it interesting is a core reason why it would be perceived as rambling. Okay, so what would be the fix here? Well, obviously you'd want to focus on the highlights that are the most relevant for you as a candidate to the job description and to the company. You could link with the interviewer if you want, but focus on the highlights. Okay, even if you have an introductory statement, the core thing should be what's in for them from you as a candidate. Another very common reason why candidates ramble when introducing themselves is because they introduce too many personal details. Okay, so usually you'd want to maybe pitch this in the beginning in one sentence, but the moment you go beyond 10 or 15% of your answer with some personal details, that's when you start rambling, and that's what you must avoid, right? Another scenario of when people ramble in Tell Me About Yourself is because they heavily reward it using AI and then they try to recite it or they try to read it during a job interview. One way to avoid, sounding like an AI candidate would be to get closer to the camera and trying to sound as genuine as possible, because you'll be surprised about the lack of trust in job interviews these days, right? And the third topic to give a great introduction in job interview is on the topic of how do you impress by 2026 standards. And I found that one of the most efficient ways to achieve this would be to tailor your introductory statement to the company and the role that you're applying for. To the company by trying to pitching some of their core values or leadership principles or Google's 10 things, for example, and for the role by subtly mentioning some keywords which would be most relevant from their job description, so you make your introduction more memorable for them and more compelling in a way, right? The second thing you'd want to pay particular attention to impress in job interviews, especially in the introductory statement, would be to quantify impact. And not only quantify impact, but also quantify it in terms of scale of the company you're applying for. If you're applying for a job with a startup, then you should focus your impact accordingly. But if you're applying for a FANG company, then you should try to think in context of this scale and try to make your achievements sound as compelling as possible, while eventually using some metrics, some numbers, or any other way you'd quantify that impact, right? What I would advise you against when trying to impress would be to fake the metrics or to fake some decisions which you did not fully own. Because, for example, if you will run your elevator pitch by ChatGPT, one of the first things they would do while rewarding it would be to fake something, to maybe introduce some new metrics which obviously are not true, or to communicate things in such a way that they're not really truthful as to who you are as a candidate. In my experience, this approach of coming up with metrics you didn't fully own is extremely inefficient, especially in today's interviews where, for an interviewer who does this for a living, who reads candidates, so to speak, for a living, it's surprisingly easy to spot some untruthful behavior, so to speak. And it can go as far as, to turn your interview into a deep dive due to some fishy metric you presented in introductory statements, right? So long story short, don't do this, because I don't think it's as efficient as people thought it would be in the past, right? Another thing you could do with your introductory statement would be to blend the why do you want to work here, why this would be a great fit for you, and why now. Okay, this would be toward the end of your introduction. Okay, so by blending this why this company towards the end, you'd have better flow, and again, you'd sell yourself as the more compelling candidate to them. And by the way, you'd also save time, because if you prepare why this company towards the end of your elevator pitch, then you no longer have to prepare the second most commonly asked interview question as a separate endeavor, but you'd rather link it in the same process, right? So pitching why you want to work here as your ending, as your closing statement, is also a good way to impress for 2026, right? Whether you want to make it, to sell yourself on your communication skills, to make it, whether you want to deliver it as a motivational statement, that's very much up to you. I would recommend against this unless you know what you're doing. And the last tip, and I believe this is extremely valuable, that not many candidates bake in to their introductory statement and throughout their job interviews today, would be to send a message of empathy and gratefulness for the occasion to interview with that specific employer. Right, so I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.